Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today is part 4 of Surah Kahf, Summary and Reflection by Themes. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So far, in every story of Surah Kahf, we noted that there were some special believers of Allah who received special and extraordinary mercy. Here it is Dhul Qarnayn. He traveled extensively and had great power given to him as a special mercy from Allah. Some scholars say he was called this name, which literally means the one with two horns, because he reached the two horns of the sun, implying where the sun rises and where it sets. And this refers to his control over territories of the east and the west. And Allah knows best. Maghrib, as used in verse 86, is used in the Quran and in Hadith as a common Arabic idiom for the West. And in verse 90, the rising point of the sun appears to be the extent of his other travel towards the east till he reached the last boundary of the land beyond which there was ocean. He reached a territory where the limits of the civilized world had come to an end, and beyond which was the territory of barbaric people. These people had no shelter at all, of tents or buildings to shade them from the sun. This showed he had reached an extremity in civilization. Imam al-Qurtubi and Ibn Kathir understood the rising and setting of the sun to indicate to the extreme places of the east and the west, as I mentioned before. Some scholars say this is Africa and China, beyond which there is nothing but the ocean. 3 nations are mentioned in this surah that Dhul Qarnayn came across from his travels. This we understand from verses 85, 89, and 92, which use the same words to mean that he traveled a course. The second and third time of his travel, the word thumma precedes this statement, showing a gap of time before he traveled again. Now let's review the verses that show that Dhul Qarnayn was also a special believer, a key theme of this surah. Every time he passed a nation, he subjugated them to call them towards Allah. We learn this from verse 87, where we see that he punishes the disbelievers of Allah. This is similar to the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, where he would acquire a kingdom and subjugate the people towards worshipping Allah. And in verse 88, he rewards the believers of Allah. We also see that he acted upon the principles of justice and generosity. We also see evidence that he is a special believer in verse 91, which says that Allah knew all concerning him, implying that Allah is well aware of his actions to please him. And from verse 95, we understand that Dhul Qarnayn received wealth and power from Allah also as a mercy. He says, "What my Lord has provided me is far better than any compensation or wage that this nation could give him for building this dam or wall," and we will go over this story next. So again, this verse reminds us of Sulaiman alayhi salam and his service for Allah with his wealth and power, and how he was always grateful to Allah. Then from the east, Dhul Qarnayn traveled until he reached his third travel destination. We learn in verse 93 that this is a place between the two mountains which were next to one another with a valley. The last road he followed must be in a different direction than east or west, because the third road is mentioned separate from his first 2 roads. It is possible the direction is now north, and Allah knows best. In this nation, The language was quite barbaric, as these people could not understand the language of Dhul-Qarnayn, and they were quite isolated of a nation. There are still nations today that remain undiscovered and do not speak any known languages. So the people here requested Dhul-Qarnayn to build a barrier so that Yajuj and Majuj, who came from the valley, would stop destroying everything. Yajuj and Majuj were from the progeny or descendants of Adam alayhi salam, according to Hadith. So he builds this wall or barrier made of iron and copper to restrain and prevent them from entering to spread corruption. What is important in verse 98 is that we learn that this wall was built from the mercy of Allah, as it protected the believers who requested it, and it postpones the arrival of the day of judgment for all of mankind. So verse 98 tells us that this wall is protecting mankind up until when the promise of Allah comes, meaning that this wall would be eventually broken by Yajuj and Majuj as an indication for the arrival of the day of judgment. Verse 99 says, the moment it collapses, Yajuj and Majuj will surge like waves onto mankind to destroy their wealth, and the trumpet will be blown and the people will be gathered. So we see how Surah Kahf started with a wondrous sign from Allah, where the youth of the cave woke up to show the deniers a sign of resurrection. And in the final story, a sign of resurrection would be the moment this wall is breached. Compare again this story to the first story, where the people did not know the youth who were sleeping in this cave for years. They did not know the location of the cave for several hundred years until Allah decided to make it known. Similarly, this wall is not visible to us and its location is unknown. It could be in a cave within two mountains sealed by this wall. So in all the stories of Surah Kahf, we have seen ayat or signs of Allah along with the signs of the day of resurrection. Please watch all the 4 parts of Surah Kahf to connect the common themes of this surah. If you have benefited, please like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.